The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Catherine walked slowly through the gardens she had grown to love. Her fingers traced the petals of the roses that bloomed along the pathway, each touch deliberate and tender, as if she was trying to memorize every detail. The weight of the decision they had made pressed heavily on her shoulders. But she knew there was no turning back now. William stood at the window of his study, watching his wife move through the garden below. His heart ached with a pain he had never experienced before, not even when he lost his mother. This was different. This was a choice they were making together, yet it felt like the hardest thing either of them had ever done. The letter from the doctors lay open on his desk, the words blurring as tears filled his eyes for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The diagnosis had come 3 months earlier, delivered in the sterile environment of a private medical facility in London. Catherine had been experiencing headaches and moments of confusion that she had initially dismissed as stress from royal duties. But when she collapsed during a charity event in Manchester, William insisted on comprehensive medical testing. The results changed everything. Dr. Elizabeth Hamilton, one of the country's leading neurologists, had explained the condition with gentle professionalism. Catherine was suffering from early-onset familial dementia, a rare genetic form of the disease that progressed rapidly and had no cure. The same condition that had claimed her grandmother's life when Catherine was just 12 years old. The irony was cruel. Catherine had spent years supporting dementia research charities, never knowing she carried the gene that would eventually claim her own memories. The weeks following the diagnosis were a whirlwind of second opinions, experimental treatments, and desperate searches for hope. William contacted specialists around the world, willing to spend any amount of money or use any royal influence to find a solution. But the answer was always the same. They had perhaps 18 months before Catherine would begin to lose herself completely. Catherine handled the news with the grace and dignity that had defined her public life. She spent hours researching the condition, understanding what lay ahead, and most importantly, making plans for their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis were still so young, 8, 6, and 4 years old respectively. How do you explain to children that their mother is going to forget them, that she will become someone else entirely while still being physically present? The decision to step back from public life wasn't made lightly. Catherine and William spent countless sleepless nights discussing their options. They could continue with royal duties for as long as possible, hiding the diagnosis from the public and their children. But Catherine couldn't bear the thought of having a confused episode during a public engagement. Or worse, during a private moment with their children that would frighten them. William initially refused to consider stepping back from his royal duties. The monarchy needed continuity, he argued. His father, King Charles, was aging, and the institution required his presence and leadership. But Catherine's gentle persistence eventually won him over. She reminded him of what truly mattered: being present for their children during the time they had left as a complete family, and ensuring that her final years were spent creating memories rather than fulfilling obligations. The conversation with King Charles was perhaps the most difficult either of them had ever had. William sat in his father's study at Clarence House, the same room where they had discussed his engagement to Catherine over a decade earlier. This time, the conversation was about endings rather than beginnings. Charles listened in stunned silence as William explained Catherine's condition and their decision to step away from royal life. The king's initial reaction was one of disbelief, then profound sadness, and finally, understanding. He had watched his own parents navigate personal challenges while maintaining their royal duties, and he knew the toll it could take. When William finished speaking, Charles stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the London streets below for a long moment. When he turned back to his son, there were tears in his eyes. "Your mother would be proud of this decision," he said quietly. "She always believed that family came before duty, even when the world expected otherwise. You have my blessing, and you have my love." The formal announcement was crafted carefully by the palace communications team. It would simply state that the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were stepping back from royal duties to focus on their young family. No mention would be made of Catherine's condition. That secret would be kept by only a handful of trusted individuals. The public deserved to see Catherine at her best, not watch her deteriorate in the spotlight. As Catherine continued her walk through the garden, she paused at the swing set William had installed for the children shortly after they moved to Windsor. She could hear their laughter from the house, where their nanny was helping them with breakfast. George was asking questions about why Mummy seemed sad lately, his 8-year-old intuition picking up on the changes in household atmosphere. Even though they had tried to maintain normalcy, Charlotte had been clinging to Catherine more than usual, sensing something was wrong even if she couldn't articulate it. And little Louis continued to be his cheerful, energetic self, blissfully unaware that anything had changed. Catherine treasured these moments of innocent joy, knowing that soon enough she would need to find ways to explain the unexplainable to her beloved children. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path drew her attention. William approached slowly, his expression a mixture of love and profound sorrow. They had barely spoken since making their final decision the night before, both lost in their own thoughts and fears about what lay ahead. When he reached her, he didn't say anything. Instead, he simply took her hand and squeezed it gently. They stood together in silence, looking back at the house that had been their sanctuary, their home, the place where they had raised their children and built their life together. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of stepping away from the world that had defined them for over a decade. Tomorrow, they would start their journey into an uncertain future, where love would have to be enough to sustain them through the darkness ahead. But for today, in this moment, they were still themselves. Still, the couple who had fallen in love at university, who had navigated the pressures of royal life together, who had raised 3 beautiful children and served their country with dedication and grace. Today, they could still look at each other and see all the dreams they had shared, all the hopes they had built together. Catherine squeezed William's hand in return, and for the first time in months, she smiled genuinely. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and their love would endure even when her memories could not. 6 months had passed since Catherine and William made their private decision to step back from royal life, and the changes were becoming more noticeable with each passing day. Catherine would sometimes pause mid-sentence during conversations, searching for words that had once come so easily to her. She would stand in rooms of their home, looking confused about why she had entered, or forget appointments that had been made just hours before. William watched these small losses accumulate with a breaking heart. Each forgotten word, each moment of confusion, felt like another piece of the woman he loved was slipping away. Yet he marveled at how Catherine faced each challenge with such courage. She had started keeping a detailed journal, writing down memories, thoughts, and messages for their children to read someday when she could no longer remember writing them. The morning routine had become sacred to them both. Catherine would wake early, before the children, and spend time in her sitting room, writing in her journal, or looking through photo albums. William would bring her tea and sit quietly beside her, sometimes talking, sometimes just being present. These quiet moments had become more precious than any royal engagement or state dinner they had ever attended. "I wrote letters for the children today," Catherine said softly one morning, not looking up from her journal. "One for each of their 18th birthdays, their wedding days, when they have children of their own." Her voice wavered slightly. "I wanted to make sure I could tell them how proud I am of them, even when I can't remember their names." William felt his throat tighten with emotion. The practical preparations Catherine was making for her own mental absence showed a strength he didn't think he possessed. She was essentially planning her own goodbye while she still had the cognitive ability to do so meaningfully. He wanted to tell her to stop, to focus on the present. But he knew these preparations brought her peace. The children had begun to notice more changes, despite their parents' efforts to maintain normalcy. George, now 9 and increasingly perceptive, had started asking direct questions about why Mummy seemed different. Charlotte, 7, and sensitive to emotional undercurrents, had become protective of her mother, always staying close and holding her hand during family activities. Louis, at 5, was the most adaptable, simply accepting that Mummy needed more help remembering things. The decision to tell the children came after an incident that shook both parents deeply. Catherine had gotten lost in their own home, wandering into George's room at 3 in the morning, confused about where she was, and calling for her own mother, who had passed away years earlier. George found her there and gently led her back to William, his young face etched with worry and confusion. William knew they couldn't wait any longer. The next evening, after dinner, they gathered all 3 children in the family room. Catherine had spent hours planning what to say, writing notes to herself to ensure she didn't forget important points. William sat beside her, ready to take over if she became confused or overwhelmed. "Mummy has been feeling unwell," Catherine began, her voice steady but soft. "It's not the kind of sick that makes your tummy hurt or gives you a fever. It's something that makes it harder for Mummy to remember things." She paused, looking at each of their faces, memorizing them. "The doctors say it's going to get worse, which means Mummy might forget more and more things as time goes on." George, always the serious one, asked the question they had been dreading. "Will you forget us, Mummy?" Catherine's composure nearly broke, but she managed to maintain her gentle tone. "I might forget some things, darling. But I want you to know that even if I forget your names or forget stories about when you were little, the love I have for you lives in a different part of my heart. That love will never go away, no matter what happens to my memory." The conversation lasted over an hour, with questions, tears, and many hugs. William was amazed by how the children processed the information, with the remarkable adaptability of youth, but also with a maturity that broke his heart. They asked practical questions about what would happen to the family, whether they would still live in the same house, and if Mummy would still be able to play with them. Charlotte, ever the emotional barometer of the family, climbed into Catherine's lap during the conversation. "Will you still love me, even if you don't remember me?" she asked in a small voice. Catherine held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, trying to imprint this moment in whatever part of her brain might retain it longest. "Sweet girl, I loved you before you were born, and I'll love you until the stars stop shining. That love is bigger than any illness, bigger than any forgetting. It's the strongest thing in the world." The weeks following their family conversation brought both relief and new challenges. The children, now aware of their mother's condition, became more helpful and patient. But William could see the weight of adult worry settling on their young shoulders. George started double-checking that Catherine had everything she needed before leaving for school. Charlotte began drawing pictures with notes attached. "This is our family, and we love each other always," leaving them around the house like love letters for her mother to find. Catherine's condition continued its relentless progression. She began having trouble recognizing faces of people she had known for years, including some of her closest friends and staff members. Simple tasks like getting dressed or preparing meals became challenging, requiring William's assistance or supervision. Yet there were still moments of startling clarity. Times when she seemed completely like herself, making these glimpses all the more precious and heartbreaking. One such moment came during a family walk through the gardens. Catherine suddenly stopped and turned to William with complete lucidity in her eyes. "I need you to promise me something," she said urgently, as if she knew these clear moments were becoming rare. When I'm not really me anymore, don't keep me like a ghost in this house. The children need to live. Really live. They need to laugh and make noise and not be afraid to be happy, because Mummy is sick." William started to protest, but she continued. "I've been thinking about this a lot, while I still can think clearly. I don't want them to spend their childhood tiptoeing around my illness. Promise me you'll help them remember the mother I am now, not the shadow I might become." The promise he made that day would haunt and guide him through all the difficult months ahead. Catherine was asking him to let her go while she was still physically present, to help their children live full lives even as they watched their mother fade. It was perhaps the most difficult promise he had ever made, but also the most important. As autumn deepened and Catherine's good days became fewer and farther between, William began making his own preparations. He started recording videos of Catherine during her clear moments, capturing her reading bedtime stories, sharing family jokes, and giving advice for future milestones their children would face. These recordings would become treasures beyond price, allowing their children to remember their mother's voice, her expressions, her essence, long after the disease had claimed these qualities from her daily presence. The last clear conversation Catherine had was on a crisp November morning. She woke up lucid and asked William to bring the children to their bed for family snuggles, something that had become more rare as her confusion increased. For 20 precious minutes, she was completely herself, asking about school projects, making jokes, planning their upcoming weekend activities. She kissed each child and told them specific things she loved about them, as if she somehow knew this might be her last opportunity to do so with full awareness. When the children left for school that morning, Catherine turned to William with tears in her eyes. "I can feel it happening," she whispered. "The fog is getting thicker. I'm scared I won't find my way back to you this time." William held her as she cried, both of them knowing that the woman he had married, the mother who had raised their children with such love and wisdom, was taking her leave. The body would remain, but the Catherine they knew and loved was saying goodbye. That evening, as William watched Catherine struggle to remember which fork to use at dinner, he realized their silent farewell had truly begun. 2 years had passed since that last clear morning, and the woman who now sat in the garden bore little resemblance to the vibrant Catherine who had once captivated the world. She spent most days in comfortable clothes, her hair pulled back simply, often staring at flowers or birds with the wonder of seeing them for the first time. William had learned to find beauty in these moments, watching her discover joy in simple things, even as it broke his heart that she no longer recognized him as her husband. The children, now 11, 9, and 7, had adapted to their new reality with remarkable resilience. They had learned to introduce themselves to their mother each day, understanding that she might not remember them from the day before. George had become protective and responsible beyond his years, often helping his younger siblings cope with particularly difficult days when Catherine became agitated or scared. Charlotte had found her own way to connect with her mother through art and music. She would sit beside Catherine and draw, chattering away about her day, school friends, and dreams, not needing responses or recognition. Sometimes Catherine would pick up a crayon and make simple marks on the paper, and Charlotte treasured these collaborative creations as precious gifts from the mother who was still there, just hidden deeper now. Louis, with the adaptability of childhood, had perhaps adjusted best of all. He would climb into Catherine's lap during her calm moments, content to simply be close to her warmth and softness, not troubled by her lack of recognition. His innocent acceptance sometimes provided the most healing moments for the entire family. William had aged years in the past months. The constant stress of caregiving, combined with grief for the wife he had lost while she was still alive, had etched new lines around his eyes and gray into his hair. Yet he had also discovered reserves of strength and love he never knew he possessed. He had become an expert in Catherine's care, learning to read her moods, anticipate her needs, and create calm in moments of confusion. The hardest part wasn't the daily care or the loss of conversation. The hardest part was the moments when Catherine would look at him with fear or confusion, sometimes asking for her husband while he stood right in front of her. Those moments required him to step outside his own pain and become whoever she needed him to be. Sometimes a gentle stranger, sometimes a helpful friend, rarely the love of her life. Dr. Hamilton continued to visit monthly, monitoring Catherine's progression and providing guidance for the family. During her most recent visit, she had gently suggested that they might want to consider how to handle Catherine's inevitable physical decline. The conversation no one wanted to have was becoming necessary. "Her brain function has deteriorated significantly," Dr. Hamilton explained to William privately, while Catherine napped in the garden. "She's entering the final stage of the disease. We need to discuss your wishes for her care as her physical condition declines." William felt the weight of decisions he never wanted to make pressing down on him. Catherine had been clear in her earlier wishes. She wanted to remain at home, surrounded by family, with dignity preserved as much as possible. But the reality of what that meant was becoming stark and immediate. The announcement that would eventually bring millions to tears came on a quiet Tuesday morning in spring. William had made the decision after consulting with his father, Catherine's doctors, and even with the children in age-appropriate ways. It was time to let the world know the truth about Catherine's condition and to say their own public goodbye to the woman who had served alongside him with such grace. The statement was released simultaneously across all royal communication channels. William had written it himself, spending weeks crafting words that would honor Catherine's memory while respecting their family's privacy. It is with profound sadness that I share news about my beloved wife, Catherine. For the past 3 years, she has been bravely battling early-onset dementia, a journey we have navigated as a family, away from public life. Catherine faced this challenge with the same dignity and grace that marked her public service, always putting our children's well-being first. The statement continued. While the Catherine the world knew and loved is no longer with us in the same way, her spirit of service, her kindness, and her love continue to guide our family every day. We are grateful for the understanding and privacy that has allowed us to care for her at home, surrounded by love. The final paragraph brought readers around the world to tears. Catherine always believed that love was the most powerful force in existence. Though she may no longer remember the life we built together, the love we shared created 3 beautiful children and countless memories that will sustain us always. We ask for continued privacy as we navigate this final chapter together. But we wanted the world to know that your Catherine, our Catherine, was loved completely until the very end. The global response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from world leaders, celebrities, and millions of ordinary people who had been touched by Catherine's public service and grace. The revelation that she had been suffering in private while maintaining her public duties only increased the admiration and love people felt for her. What moved people most deeply was not just the tragedy of early-onset dementia, but the way William and the children continued to care for Catherine with such devotion. Photos occasionally emerged of the family in their garden, William gently guiding Catherine to see flowers, the children playing nearby, all of them making the best of an impossible situation. The final public appearance came 6 months later. Catherine had been having a series of good days, more alert and responsive than she had been in months. William made the decision to take her to the small chapel at Windsor for a quiet service of thanksgiving. Not a goodbye, but a celebration of the love they had shared and the family they had created. The images from that day became iconic. Catherine, dressed in a simple blue dress she had always loved, sat quietly beside William as their children sang in the chapel choir. She didn't recognize the hymns or understand the service, but she smiled at the music and seemed peaceful in the sacred space. William held her hand throughout, occasionally whispering in her ear, though she showed no recognition of his words. After the service, they walked slowly through the chapel gardens. Catherine stopped at every flower, touching petals with the wonder of a child. The children took turns walking beside her, patient with her slow pace and gentle with her confusion. In the final photograph that was shared with the world, the family sat together on a garden bench, Catherine in the center with a child on each side of her and William's arm protectively around them all. That image, more than any words, captured the essence of their silent farewell. Here was a family that had faced an unimaginable challenge, with grace, love, and dignity. Here were children learning that love persists even when memory fails, that caring for someone is an honor, even when it's difficult, that family means staying together through every season of life. Catherine passed away peacefully on a quiet morning in early winter, with William holding her hand and their children nearby. She had been unresponsive for several days, but in her final moments, William was certain he saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a brief return of the woman he had loved for over 20 years. The funeral was private, attended only by immediate family and closest friends. But the impact of their story continued to resonate around the world. William's courage in sharing Catherine's struggle helped remove stigma from dementia and inspired countless families facing similar challenges. Their children, now forever changed by their experience of loving someone through such profound loss, carried forward lessons about compassion, strength, and the enduring power of family love. In his final public statement about Catherine, William wrote, "She taught us that love is not diminished by disease, that dignity can be preserved even in decline, and that saying goodbye is sometimes the greatest act of love we can offer. Our silent farewell lasted 3 years, but our love will last forever." The phrase, silent farewell, became a symbol for families everywhere who were caring for loved ones with dementia, reminding them that goodbyes can be gradual, love can persist without recognition, and that sometimes the most profound expressions of love happen in the quiet moments when no one else is watching.